He was verbally, emotionally, and mentally abusive throughout our 20 years together. Did do many violent things. He had nearly beaten to death one cat and did beat to death another cat.
It began with hope and an innocent search for family and belonging. But what started as a reunion soon twisted into something far darker.
Cops say Steven was Katie's father, and the two had an incestuous relationship. The baby found dead in North Carolina was said to be their child.
Behind the smiles and promises of a fresh start, secrets were lurking. Boundaries would be crossed, lives would be shattered, and what should have been a story of love and healing would instead become a nightmare that no one saw coming. A desperate emergency call had set the stage for one of the most chilling cases imaginable.
He killed his baby and used in the house.
Okay, you said that he told you he killed his baby? Okay, ma'am, listen to me. What's your name?
What began as fear quickly spiraled into tragedy, leaving dispatchers scrambling to make sense of the unfolding nightmare. At the center was a young woman who had been adopted years earlier. Hoping to reconnect with her biological parents, she searched for love and belonging.
The girl, now 20, was adopted at birth and reconnected with her father at age 18. The two then decided they'd get married. Neighbors in North Carolina are reacting tonight to the infant's death.
But instead found herself drawn into a disturbing reality that grew darker with each passing day. What started as a search for family soon twisted into something dangerous, leaving an entire community stunned and investigators struggling to trace the destructive chain of events.
While still a very active scene, as you can see behind me, while detectives investigate where they found those two bodies this morning.
Years earlier, in the mid-1990s, a young man in his 20s had begun an online relationship with a teenage girl from Texas. Despite her age, he traveled from New York to meet her. And with her family's approval, the relationship continued.
Tonight, investigators say that baby was just 7 months old. His name was Bennett, and he was born to a father and his daughter.
Soon after, she became pregnant. What should have been a new beginning, instead, set in motion a deeply troubling path. Built on secrecy and manipulation, that relationship created a family on fragile ground, one destined to collapse under the weight of its own cracks. Years later, the cracks in that fragile foundation wind into a path of destruction. In January of 1998, just 2 years after the first meeting, the teenage girl gave birth to a daughter. What should have been a moment of joy soon turned dark.
Till we find out what it is, it's pretty upsetting, you know. Anytime there's an infant or baby and child involved, you know, it's pretty bad.
She later claimed she had witnessed disturbing behavior from her partner, abuse that left her terrified for her baby's safety. By the time the child was 8 months old, the young mother reached her breaking point. Believing it was the only way to protect her, she placed the little girl up for adoption. A loving couple in Dover, New York, welcomed her into their home, gave her the name Katie, and raised her with care and stability.
The multi-state investigation of 4 deaths began with a baby being found dead in a Knightdale, North Carolina home.
She grew up into a bright, artistic young woman, preparing for college and a future filled with promise. But the past had not disappeared. Katie's biological parents remained together and went on to have 2 more daughters, though tension and instability continued to mark their household. Years later, everything changed when Katie, now 18, used social media to track down her birth parents. Reconnecting with them felt like a turning point.
Within the last 15 minutes, police say that the murder investigation of that infant in North Carolina is linked to the homicide investigations.
Instead of continuing her college plans, she decided to move to Henrico, Virginia, to live with her biological family. Though her adoptive parents had concerns, they allowed her to make her choice as an adult. It was a decision that would set in motion a devastating chain of events.
On our arrival, we located 2 victims who were deceased on scene.
Inside, the bodies of Katie Pladl and her adoptive father.
The reunion had brought excitement, but beneath the surface, old issues lingered. What seemed like a second chance at family quickly began to unravel. Steven, the father, shifted in ways Alyssa, the mother, could no longer ignore. He changed his appearance, tried to look younger, and grew unusually close to Katie.
She would cry and and it would just instantly trigger him. He would curse, he would tell me to shut her the hell up, he would at times scoop her up and place her into a big cooler that we had.
Even after Alyssa revealed the painful truth of her own past, the bond between father and daughter only deepened. When Steven began sleeping on the floor of Katie's bedroom, Alyssa confronted him. His defensive reaction only widened the cracks in their marriage. By the end of 2016, she filed for divorce, taking custody of the younger daughters while Katie remained with Steven. Now free from restraint, their relationship crossed lines that should never have been crossed.
Here's a look at the two. They've been identified as Steven Pladl and Katie Pladl. The two were arrested in January, charged with incest.
The truth came to light in May of the following year, when the couple's 11-year-old daughter revealed in her journal that Katie was pregnant and Steven saw them as a couple. Alyssa, horrified, turned to the authorities, but Steven and Katie continued living together. On July 20th, 2017, they married in Maryland by concealing their true relationship. Friends and family attended, unaware of the deception. Just weeks later, Katie gave birth to a son, Bennett. For a brief time, it seemed they had built a strange version of happiness, but it would not last. By early 2018, the law finally caught up with them. Steven and Katie were arrested, charged with incest, adultery.
You may recall that those individuals were the subject of an arrest here in Knightdale back in January 2018.
And contributing to delinquency. DNA tests confirmed the truth of their family ties, leaving little room for doubt in the courtroom. Steven's lawyer argued that the relationship had been born out of unusual circumstances, but the court was unmoved. Both Steven and Katie were released on bail under strict orders to avoid contact with one another. Katie returned to live with her adoptive parents in New York, while Steven remained in Virginia. For the first time, distance was placed between them, but it was not enough to undo the damage. Katie eventually told Steven that she no longer wished to continue their relationship.
20-year-old Katie Pladl and 56-year-old Anthony Fusco were killed in his pickup truck in New Milford yesterday by multiple gunshots from an assault rifle.
For Steven, already isolated and stripped of his family, the rejection was more than he could bear. The months that followed were marked by turmoil. Legal battles over custody strained relationships, and the collapse of what Steven had convinced himself was love drove the family deeper into heartbreak. Steven killed Katie, their child, and the girl's adoptive father before killing himself.
A few miles across the New York state line in Wingdale, cops found the alleged shooter, Steven Pladl, also dead from a self-inflicted gunshot.
In the end, what had begun as a fragile reunion between a father and daughter ended in devastation for everyone involved. Alyssa later reflected on the years on chaos, grief, and unimaginable loss. She spoke of the pain of losing her daughter, her grandchild, and the life she had once thought she knew. Yet in her grief, she also found a small measure of relief. The long and painful chapter with Steven was finally closed. Our thoughts go out to the family and all those affected in this case. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, and leave a comment below.